be on his land board and evaluate the leases in Texas that manage the billions of dollars that go to the permanent school fund. And I have my own law practice, which we'll talk about, and why I had to start that. I was a top 10 environmental lawyer in America, with the top 10 revenue business in the US, and we came to an ultimatum over pronouns on my bio and other fun things, and so I ended up walking away from that and started my firm about a year ago. So we'll talk a little bit about that in this talk, The Magnanimous Catholic, Exercising Virtue Boldly in Modern Life. I learned last year the heartbreaking story of Soren, a young woman whose life was forever altered by a surgical procedure that was supposed to be a cure for a psychological issue, namely gender dysphoria. This is the psychological delusion that you're born in the body of the wrong sex. After Soren discovered transgenderism online during her parents' divorce, which is very typical, she began identifying as a boy at the age of 11, and then pursued hormone replacement therapy at the age of 17. After undergoing a botched double mastectomy at age 19, Soren found herself alone in the emergency room with doctors reopening her wounds. She thought she was going to die, and she was right. Her medical complications opened her eyes to the ills of affirmative care, which she says enabled her and her mother to believe that pills, injections, and procedures could provide her the sense of self that she craved growing up. She has permanent facial hair, a permanently deep voice, and she's unable to have children permanently. She's a vocal advocate against the enabling medical industry and believes that detransitioners could very well be the leaders of the next Me Too style movement. She testified in support of Texas House Bill 12. This woman is openly gay and has a tattoo of the transgender flag on her forearm. She was subsequently fired from her job as a barista in Austin, canceled for her position on this issue. She is not progressive enough. Dr. Eitan Haim is a surgeon in Houston. Last year, he exposed a secret sex change program at Texas Children's Hospital, down the street in Katy, also downtown the Med Center. The hospital CEO publicly lied that these procedures were not happening at his hospital, which included the administration of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, both interventions that the hospital would later claim were temporary. They're not. In fact, the hospital continued to perform transgender medical interventions on children as young as 11, condemning 11-year-old boys and girls to their 11-year-old bodies. When you begin to take these blockers, these 11-year-old boys will have their 11-year-old anatomy for the rest of their lives. Condemning 11-year-old boys and 11-year-old girls to their 11-year-old bodies for life. An example of a surgery performed on these children is known as nullification, in which a smooth, continuous skin covering from the abdomen to the groin is created following a castration or vaginectomy. In other words, the perfectly healthy genitalia of children are replaced by nothing. Nullification surgery is the perfect symbol for the ideology behind the trans movement, the pursuit of the Latin nullum, meaning nothing, or the related nihil, the root of the English word nihilism. Trans ideology is animated by a profound nihilism that denies human nature and enables barbarism in the name of progress. Another doctor at a major children's hospital, still anonymous, had this to say about what puberty blockers do to a child's body, mind, and soul. Puberty blockers are a surgery-free chemical intervention with the same effect as nullification, sterilization, and system-wide hormonal failure. Puberty blocker medication is called gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonist, and it comes in the form of a monthly injection or an implant. They have to implant them because over 70% of the children who receive these treatments are special needs and have Down syndrome. Because it stimulates the activity of this hormone, it shuts down the activity of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is an almond-shaped structure in your brain. It's one of the most primal structures that we have, and it controls all other hormonal structures in your body, your sexual development, your emotions, your fight or flight response, everything. And I always think, this doctor says, that if someone were to ask me, where is it that you would look for the divine spark in each individual, I would say that it would be somewhere beneath the inner chamber, which is the Greek derivation of the term hypothalamus. To shut down that system is to attempt to shut down what makes us human. My client, the surgeon, Dr. Heim, was unwilling to look the other way when he saw these things happening as a medical student at his hospital. Blowing the whistle would ruin his career. Following the story's publication, when he came public, Texas legislatures passed Senate Bill 14 within 24 hours of his testimony, criminalizing all child sex change procedures statewide. Then the story took another turn, and this is where I stop saying things where you have to cover your children's ears. Federal agents, presumably having reviewed forensic information about Texas children's internal servers, tracked down Dr. Heim and appeared at his doorstep delivering a target letter. He was under investigation by the Department of Justice for no apparent reason, because they state no claim. Their visit was a brutal tool to coerce him into silence. Since he's come public, we've had numerous other whistleblowers with FBI agents at their doors. The Assistant U.S. Attorney in Houston, Tina Ansari, who prosecuted him, is a longtime political hack. She has been multiple times kicked out of federal court for bringing baseless, malicious prosecutions to political opponents. DOJ, in its conversations with my law firm, made it clear its malicious intent. They admit they have no evidence. They would get our client on a technicality if they could. Another of our whistleblowers was told by the FBI, "We know people at your hospital who want to harm you. If you don't stop talking, we're not going to stop them." The Biden administration wants to make a point. Those who challenge trans orthodoxy will be punished by the state, and my law firm has decided to call their bluff. We built a strategy around Dr. Heim to take on the transgender ideology based on his case of creating an offensive against the entire regime of the Department of Justice. I and two partners of my law firm, both of whom spent decades at the Department of Justice in senior executive service, have blown the whistle to Congress and called for a congressional investigation, which we're currently organizing, to haul the CEO of Texas Children to chamber with my client, and let's see who's telling the truth. We've also hired Soren, the young woman I mentioned, as a researcher at my law firm, until she can find another job since she was canceled. She is shoulder to shoulder with us, and we with her. When we first met with Soren about working at the firm without an entail, I explained to her our firm values. I asked her about her girlfriend, and I said, if you're going to work at our firm, two things need to happen. You need to start going to adoration every week and reporting back, and you need to break up with your girlfriend. We spoke last week. Her best friend just was confirmed Catholic. She's praying a rosary every day, and she is broken up with her girlfriend, seriously considering joining the church. So today I will discuss a few things. I've been asked to present on how to be Catholic in the modern world, specifically whether and how to engage in the public square. I'm both humbled and honored to share how my engagement in the public square, with my vocation as a wife and a mother of 4 small children, how that incorporates to my Catholic faith. My prayer today is you will be inspired to boldly exercise virtue in the modern world, which seems altogether consumed by vice. We often find ourselves complaining or critiquing the failures of political leaders and the destructive policies that affect the safety and flourishing of our families, schools, and nation. Being a critic is easy. In fact, most of us are born quite skilled at it, and some of us go to law school to learn how to be better at it. However, as Teddy Roosevelt famously said, it is not the critic who counts. Not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, and who strives valiantly. So what does it require to be the man, or in my case, the woman in the arena of the public square today? And I would say 1, gunpowder. We are in Texas after all. And 2, magnanimity, or virtue. Gunpowder. You may have heard the slogan, keep your powder dry. It's what we are told by our friends and families to comfort us into acquiescence when the culture pushes against us in our schools and our offices. But the way gunpowder works is the way virtue works. To grow it, you have to use it. We must steward what is entrusted to us. We're all born with a small ration of gunpowder, and until we use it, the arsenal will not grow. We are baptized into a massive artillery we can access at our fingertips. It was the idea of having a massive artillery of gunpowder to fight the nihilists that has most inspired Soren to become Catholic. Magnanimity is the Aristotelian framework for building virtue to engage in the public square. It's the idea that virtue is attained by practice and habit, and that virtues build upon one another. Only when you have achieved sufficient virtue, proven by your valor, then are you equipped to engage in the public square. The idea that a young man or woman in their 20s would be elected a senator was anathema to the Greeks. Only the tested are proven to serve the polis politically. How far have we strayed from this idea of political engagement? It definitely appears we have some inexperienced youth running the country, and elderly without proven valor as our modern politicians and president. The magnanimous man is a big-hearted by definition, supremely generous. Aristotle would define supreme generosity as magnificence. The magnanimous man is a deal maker, wise but cunning, lauded for his contributions to a civic society, completely disinterested in the reward or recognition for his efforts and achievement. He's the perfect combination of prudence, courage, fortitude, and self-control. Aquinas adopts the Aristotelian framework and baptizes it into the Christian Logos. His work is picked up by 20th century Jewish philosopher Edith Stein, who coined the term feminine genius, and for the first time studied whether women should or are even capable of magnanimity in her philosophy of personalism. She converts to Rome and is martyred in the Holocaust. John Paul II credits her with his work on the feminine genius in his Theology of the Body. He explains in his Wednesday homilies that women should be everywhere men are. Pregnant women and mothers especially are needed in the modern world in the public square. He calls for the magnanimous woman and the magnanimous mother to enter the arena. Magnanimity goes hand in hand with virtue. Attila the Hun, Stalin, Hitler accomplished staggering political victories, but because the means and ends were evil and opposed to virtue, they were not magnanimous. This is to say that law informs culture, because law informs morality. All laws legislate morality, and for too long, the conservative legal movement and Catholic parents and Catholic lawyers have avoided engaging in the moral arguments in our schools and our businesses. Catholic lawyers, professionals, teachers, mothers, and fathers have ignored the moral ramifications of not engaging. We're at a dangerous point where we have a compulsive, knee-jerk opposition to making moral arguments without the inclination to evaluate whether we have an obligation to make them, including in the secular arenas in which we find ourselves from day to day. Do we think that there is not a single Orthodox Catholic school teacher in HISD? Of course there are. So why hasn't she sued? For numerous claims you could make against this nihilistic orthodoxy rampant in our backyards. I don't think it's just because she's afraid, which she likely could be. I think it's because she's probably in a teacher union. I think we have a real crisis in education and in the living out of what it actually means to be a Catholic in these places. We're afraid to face the stark moral crisis we find ourselves in the church. And there's a line divided between what we hear in the pew and how we live it out on the front lines. Our people are ignorant on virtue and how virtue works. These are the tools in our tool belt, the weapons we have on the field, and we don't know where to find them in our garage. It's cases like these that illustrate that it's time to ground our legal theory and to animate our own motivation as professionals and parents in the natural law tradition, specifically virtue. It's time for parents and policymakers to take serious the role of virtue in a free society and building it up substantively. By substantively, I mean in the curriculum. There's no reason why a robust study of virtue is not in a public school curriculum. other than there's not a Catholic on a school board to bring it up. Who are the magnanimous men of our era, or eras past, who did this? Washington, obviously, was a model of virtue in many ways. Coolidge, Eisenhower, Lincoln, Roosevelt, dedicated to the ruthless pursuit of virtue and the common good. Their valor was proven and prolific. But what about Catholic examples? We have St. Thomas More, martyred by the government that he served, the patron saint of lawyers. He's a personal favorite, but I happen to be a lawyer. Who are the magnanimous women? Those who have taken on evil political regimes of their day in the name of Christ, who have not kept their powder dry, but entered the arena. One example is Joan of Arc, a female peasant youth called to lead the French army, an eccentric who cut her hair and dressed as a male, who entertained visions and voices to determine her battlefield strategy. She endured a humiliating death, set afire by her traitors, who included her bishops. To date, next to the Blessed Mother, she remains the most written about woman in recorded history, not unlike her master, who suffered an even more humiliating death on the cross, and remains the most written about man in history. No one here would refute Mother Teresa or Mother Carini's impact on their communities and the world, but they were religious. They didn't have children. Their magnanimity is irrefutable, but less practically relatable to those of us who work and have families. They remain highly relevant, though. Were any of us to spend a fraction of our time the way they did, we might have a chance to make a fraction of the impact in the work of redemption. We should pay close attention, or are we too busy to even contemplate prioritizing our time? Queen Isabella of Spain was a political leader and a mother. She had 7 children, and she sponsored the magnanimous men of her day, Christopher Columbus, Cortez, whom she funded to defeat, with Christendom, a satanic regime that rivals ours today in sacrificing innocent human life, the Aztecs. Her role sponsoring magnanimous men spreading Christendom bests the presidents mentioned above, who preserved a society that could choose Christianity if it would like, but did not explicitly do so, proclaiming the cross. None of those presidents have been canonized, but St. Queen Isabella is one of our titans. St. Helen of Troy was not a ruler herself, but she inspired her emperor son's conversion to Christ and subsequently transformed the Holy Roman Empire. She remained to a certain extent in the background at the back of the room, nudging her son and preserving the treasures of the church. Her role behind the scenes imitates Mother Mary, the magnanimous mother who guides and encourages her son to greatness, to his cross. Finally, Zélie Martin, not a political leader, but a business leader, a successful lace manufacturer. She wasn't a lace maker with an Etsy page. She had dozens of people employed in buildings that she rented to produce a large business. Her husband worked from home so she could run the business. They had 5 children who all became religious, including the doctor of the church, Therese of Lisieux, and 4 additional children who did not survive youth. She and her husband were, of course, canonized together. A working mom. Okay, so we're finished with the history lesson. You likely were unexpected. But it's important to remember that we're not the first people living in a time that requires courage and action empowered by our faith. I'll now share some of my personal journey as a Catholic woman, as well as some battle scars from the arena. I began my study of magnanimity in college. I'd spent some time with the Sisters of Life, feeling called to a life of holiness and prayer, but also to the public square, and their order is devoted to pro-life study and action, and so it seemed to fit. I hoped I might have a vocation. When I entered, I was caught smuggling a tweezers in. Surely you need not have a unibrow to be holy, I thought. Long story short, it was not a fit. Mother Agnes instructed me not to conflate a call to holiness with a call to religious life. That I could certainly be called to a wife and a mother and a civic leader. She commended John Paul II and Edith Stein's writings on women to me, as well as those of Sister Prudence Allen, who wrote an anthology of women. My continued study of magnanimity flipped on its head the Aristotelian ideal. To be magnanimous in the Christian framework is a paradox. With Christ, to be magnanimous is to be humble. The first will be last, the small will be great. Renounce the world and come follow Jesus, come what may. The humble will be extolled. The losers, great in virtue, will win. Jesus and Mother Mary are the archetypes of magnanimity, poor, simple, obscure. They changed the world, to put it mildly, without ever holding office. How is this compatible with the Aristotelian framework? In the modern moment today, there isn't much literature that contemplates the role of women or parents in civics. The commentary we have confuses things. Take the recent scandal surrounding celebrity exorcist Father Ripperter's commentary on feminists, in which he scolds upper and middle class women, carte blanche, anthropology be damned. Women who work outside the home are, quote, betraying their children and their souls are in grave peril. In his estimation, how could a woman be magnanimous? Would he scold Mother Agnes's advice to a young Marcella? Would he say Queen Isabella and Zelly Martin should have never been canonized? Or were they exceptions to his rule? There are other voices on this topic modernly, but who are the living examples? I can think of my two clients, Soren, the lesbian transgender, and Dr. Heim, the Jew. They better live out the Christian model of magnanimity than most Catholic lawyers I know. All I can offer is my personal story. I am not a magnanimous woman, not by any stretch. I am still licking the wounds of having to leave my law firm and start afresh. All I can do is share where I've been led and why I march on. My first foray into politics was running for class president in grade school. I won the vote, but the school announced another girl would take the role. The grade revolted, including the girl who won, who didn't want the job. The party bosses decide to whom the victor would be, and I was thereby initiated into the political process and the importance of lobbying, and not only the polis, but the electoral college, the true stakeholders and decision makers. Years later, after I was expelled from that school, another story, again for another day, I got into West Point. When the congresswoman who nominated me, Sheila Jackson Lee, saw that I was white, she took back her nomination. She said that she would send no one rather than sending me. Her staff told me, we don't nominate people like you, white people to be specific. This was my introduction to party politics, into identity politics, and DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. DE&I is a euphemism for infecting racism and party politics into your business, and it's illegal. I learned this lesson about the Constitution, the First Amendment, Title VII, use of power, how power corrupts, and the role of gutless bystanders keeping their powder dry at a very young age. In college, I took a year off to pursue religious life. I'd mentioned my time with the Sisters of Life. When it was clear my life call was to be in the public square, I ran for student body president at Texas A&M. Again, I won the popular vote. This time we went to a runoff. After the results were announced, my opponents filed a bogus complaint in a student honor report saying I lied about my background and must be disqualified. I was put to a trial in a student court. The student newspaper, run by my opponent's girlfriend, slandered me for weeks. My face was put on pornographic images and circulated on campus. What was I accused of? My church involvement was at question, among other things. Members of my own parish had testified against me, lying about my church involvement. My best friends distanced themselves. Unlike Joan of Arc, who was betrayed by her bishops at her trial, my pastor and dear friend today, now Bishop Mike Siss, was called to testify on my behalf to confirm my church involvement, something he could have easily decided not to do. His testimony moved the judges to tears, and it put a stop to the entire scandal. I was cleared of all charges, but disgraced and humiliated, and I lost the runoff in spades. The number of lessons in politics I learned are too numerous to recount, but overall it's not for the faint of heart, and it will show you who your true friends are. It's become my deeply held belief that only people who are fully alive are those willing to share the truth. Consequences be damned. It's not the critic who counts, but the man in the arena, and the happiest among those brave souls are those with friends and true friends. There's no better way to live your life than the arena among friends. And I've made more friends in the political world than I have at church throughout these years. The rest is history. After some practice, using my gunpowder, I became a much better shot. I went to law school. I was a leader in Ted Cruz's Senate campaign in town. I clerked and I interned for federal and state court judges. I did 2 fellowships in constitutional law. I got credentialed. And then I got a job at a massive energy law firm doing energy deals. I was called out of the blue at my desk to work for President Trump when he won his election, the first time. And I didn't know anyone, I thought, in the Trump campaign. After all, I've been working for Senator Cruz. I was asked to be the senior executive service lawyer in charge of all onshore and offshore oil and gas for the United States federal government, including all renewables and carbon capture. Much to the chagrin of my never-Trump friends, mostly Catholics, some of whom stopped talking to me when I took the appointment. We took the job, took our kids, and moved to Washington. St. Thomas More was not too good to work for Henry VIII. I would not be too good to work for Donald Trump. We came home and I became a partner at a top 20 firm in the United States and an equity partner at a top 10 global firm. I was making a lot of money. I was too big to fail. Until, despite my profitability and the revenue, I refused to capitulate to a slate of progressive agenda items foisted on me after COVID had settled down. I wouldn't put pronouns on my bio. I wouldn't get vaccinated. I was told I was a, quote, waste of a female equity partner by a man who had 1/5 of the revenue for the law firm that I did. He told me I needed to apologize for my white privilege, which of course I refused to do. I used my last remaining shots when I refused to join the firm's post-Dobbs pro-abortion legal project. They needed a female partner to help represent an associate in Austin who wanted an abortion. I was not only the only female partner in Texas, I was the only female equity partner in Texas, and I refused to take the job. The entire Houston office was run by conservatives. Every single lawyer was a conservative man who went to church every Sunday and had at least 3 children, but one. The man at the end of the hall who was putting me under this ordeal. When I went up and down the halls, looking for someone to support what I was doing, everyone kept their door shut, keeping their powder dry. I came home from interviewing for a new job, and my husband let me know, no, I would not be working for a law firm ever again unless it was mine. The progressives had run their march through the institutions, including the law, and it was conquered. The remaining conservatives were castrated. They neutered themselves. The ration of gunpowder being saved for another day. The only way to take the law back is to rebuild. My husband let me know that he registered the Burke Law Group that day with the Texas Secretary of State, and that is how my law firm started. My marquee clients followed me, and Shirley Wood Legal Team. The firm started with 7 founding partners and associates, and we now today, just over a year later, have over 20 attorneys on payroll in our 4 offices. We have 2 more offices opening this year. We're all serious Christians and Jews who have renounced the major firms and are committed to building an elite firm with the audacious goal of becoming one of the top 50 firms in the United States. No HR, no DE&I, no ESG, just lawyers. I have a few hiring proxies that I use. They never fail. I'll share them here, but please don't put them on the internet. Never hire a man with a woke wife.
With a what?
Do not hire a woman on the pill. We also have a 3-child minimum. Now, not everyone has 3 children. It comes up in the interviews, where do you see your family? If you say no children, or you're good with 1, it's just not going to be a good fit for you at our law firm. We built a small army of credentialed elite patriots with families to defend and a country to save. 80% of our work is commercial. We do mergers and acquisitions, venture capital. The head of the M&A practice at Cooley, one of the largest firms in America, joined my law firm, Catholic, 5 kids, sick and tired of big law. The managing partner of Simpson Thacher, the largest global banking firm here in Houston, joined my law firm. The head of mergers and acquisitions for CalPERS in California, the largest retirement system, and all the work they do, joined the firm. When I needed to find a lawyer to defend Dr. Heim and his cases against the FBI, I called my friends in the DOJ, told them to stop keeping that powder dry. A friend of mine joined, who I'd met in the Trump administration. He'd worked in the DOJ for 3 administrations. He burrowed out in the Trump years, much to the chagrin of his career colleagues, and took senior status in the administration. He had many opportunities to make a lot more money in Big Law. He joined my firm to take these cases against the hospitals. And there are over a dozen others that have joined the firm. And thanks be to God. I'm currently head of the transition team for the next Trump administration on the issue of transgender medicine, an issue my law firm has taken head on. We draft the executive orders, legislation, and policy to rescind the Biden administration's treacherous work on day one. I'm also on the day one executive order team, in which we've been meeting monthly for 2 years, drafting a slate of now over 280 executive orders that hopefully President Trump will sign on the first day of his administration, rescinding all of the Biden agenda on day one. If I were too pure to work for a man like Donald Trump in 2016, or too important to not be in a big law firm, none of this would have been done. Does it mean that the jet share we were going to have in September 2024 didn't work out? Yes. I don't get to have a private jet flying me around anymore. That's a heck of a first world problem. So in closing, my challenge to you is this. Pray and ask God which arena He's calling you to step into in a magnanimous way, specifically in public life. There are almost 0 Catholic women on any public or private school board, public or private. How about the libraries in Houston? Get a job as a librarian. Have your child get a job as a librarian. It may be running for state representative, or the state senate, or supporting someone unpopular in your groups of friends who's running for office. I've hardly supported a candidate that didn't get me blacklisted from some dinner party for a few months. Working for a President Trump could be an option, or a Governor Abbott. Do not fear what others may think or say about you, because we know, and our God knows, it is not the critic who counts, but the man in the arena knowing that their God is a God of gunpowder.